What's good, y'all? Elvis here. If you haven't seen already, I started a new series called Better Barbering Crash Course. It's basically a series of super tutorials. I feel like most of the tutorials on YouTube are really repetitive and redundant and don't give that much practical information as far as actually becoming better as a barber, other than this is how I cut hair and these are the steps I do. And I consider them super tutorials because I jam-pack a bunch of different haircuts and as much practical game as I possibly can that relates to not just building your skill as a barber, but I share tips and tricks that made me a better barber overall for sure. Our first installment was a super fade tutorial. I put like 4 different fades in that video, and it's chock full of me sharing gaming experience that directly made me a better barber. The link is somewhere on the screen and or the description. In this episode of our Better Barbering Crash Course, we're focusing strictly on lineups, and not just easy, ideal lineups. To be as comprehensive as possible, we're working with some more problematic lineups. Lineups that aren't naturally straight and that are thinning in the corners. I'm going to show you how I cut my clients that have these things going on with their hair. All right, this intro feels long, so let's get into it. All right, y'all, so here we have a haircut already done. All we got to do is a lineup. This is specifically a lineup video. I have fade videos. You can go watch those. So here I'm going to be showing you what his lineup is naturally. It's a lot more slanted than it appears. We just have a lot more hair hanging on the right side just to give the illusion of more symmetry. So the first thing I'm doing, even before I grab any trimmers to start lining up, I'm going to be trimming down the hair that would hang over his line. Here I'm using a 1.5 guard, and usually that would be pretty long for any other client, but keep in mind I gotta keep his right side dark to hide that corner. So I'm keeping it on the thicker side first. Now I grabbed a 1 guard and I'm kind of just playing with it, making sure I'm trying to trim it down so it's at least looking consistent in darkness. Make sure you're dusting your clients off. You want to keep them comfortable. Here I'm continuing the lineup preparation process, wiping it down with some rubbing alcohol, drying it, and then coming behind it with some holding spray, and then drying it again. And that allows me to freeze the hairs in place and give me a nice clean workspace. So now we're jumping in, and of course we want to start from the middle and then work towards the higher corner, because you can always, it's always easier to start from the higher corner and make the lower corner match than to start on the lower corner and then have to keep going back and forth adjusting. And because his right corner is naturally higher, we're going to have to push the left corner back to make it symmetrical. Pushbacks are sometimes a necessary evil. Now we're jumping to the side, working on these sidebars. One thing I've noticed about a lot of barbers that grew up on Instagram, they don't understand that clients usually appreciate a more natural lineup that fits them than something that looks artificially sharp that looks fantastic on Instagram. When in doubt, try to keep it as natural as possible. Here we got our rough draft of the lineup just with the trimmers. Now I'm cleaning up with my straight razor, and I consider the lineup before with the trimmers only as a rough draft, and I really start finalizing it with the straight razor. So after the razor, this is usually the point where the lineup is basically finished, but let me show you how being detail oriented can take it up a whole nother level. So we're going to be using enhancement on this cut. I'm using air compressor and 245 no drip black brown, I believe. And here I'm applying it with an enhancement card, a 245 enhancement card, I'm pretty sure. But notice, it's kind of hard from this video, but notice how I'm not directly spraying on the hairline. I'm really spraying on the card and letting the color mist towards the hairline. Because when you spray directly on the skin, it comes off like paint. It doesn't look like real hair. Here I'm touching up a few hairs that were hanging over the line, especially the line that I sprayed on. And the trimmers doesn't actually move this color off the skin, but if you use a straight razor, you can actually scrape back a little bit of the color if you overspray. But it also, if you overspray, you can just wipe it off with alcohol and try again. That's what I love about the no drip. So now I'm cleaning up some cellus hairs, little hairs on your forehead. And these are all tiny details that add to a big benefit of just taking your cut quality up a notch. But here's the finished product. All right, now we on cut number 2, where this is a taper. So we're gonna be lining up the back. And one thing I like to do before I start lining up the back is take down the hair around the ear, usually with a no guard open or maybe a 1, depending on the texture. But Just like how I was taking down the hairline before, it keeps it a lot cleaner when you're lining it up because there won't be as many hairs laying over the line that you're putting in with the trimmers. And you won't have to keep hitting those same hairs as much. One thing I noticed is that when some barbers are lining up behind the ear or such, a lot of people don't use the corner of their trimmer as much and they try to use the whole blade. And that's not as ideal because you have less control of where the blade is, but then also the hair that you're cutting. And if your trimmers are zero gapped, it makes it very easy to cut your client behind the ear if you're using the whole blade rather than the corner. And honestly, trimmers don't need to be zero gap for real. They just need to be sharp enough to cut the hair cleanly, not the skin. Now we're just cutting hair down along the lineup. And if you notice, my client has thinning corners, so I'm cutting down the darker parts to make the line look more consistent before I line them up. Now we're doing the same preparation process: alcohol, let it dry, hold and spray, then letting it dry. Now we're beginning with the lineup, of course starting in the middle, then working our way to the higher side. When it comes to clients with thin corners, you want to be treating their hairline very delicately. A lot of barbers assume to get a dark straight line, they just got to cut out the thin areas or cut back into them, and I do not recommend that. You get a more consistent full line if you just thin out some darker areas to make them more consistent with lighter areas and then line up across that. Even if the line is thin in some places, as long as it's symmetrical and it fits your client's head and all that, most clients understand what they're working with, so they don't expect any crazy transformations unless they specifically want enhancement or something. Right now we're working on the corners, and I started on the side with the higher corner and now I'm making this side match, making sure I use corner of the blade to cut precisely. Take a shot every time I say corner. All right, before the razor, this is the rough draft. After I line up with the trimmers, it's usually pretty straight and symmetrical, but I like to really refine it with the razor and to get those angles right. And a tip for lining up the sidebars, line them up with the eyebrows. Your eyebrows are almost always the most symmetrical thing on your face. Of course, just because we're using the razor doesn't mean we're done. Now we're going to be touching up details, and combing down hairs over the line and cutting those with the trimmers is what's going to make your cuts or your lineups last days, if not weeks, longer than usual. Pro tip.
Now we're on cut number 3, doing the lineup prep process again, wiping it down with alcohol. And for my bearded clients, I usually hit the top line of their beard with the alcohol, not with the holding spray, but it allows a nice little ash line when I hit it with the razor. Once again, we're establishing our line in the middle, and then we're going to be working from our higher side. When you're working on these corners, you really want to take your time and not get ahead of yourself, because it's really easy to try to go ahead and do one corner and then make the other side match and realize that you kind of completely jacked up this guy's hairline. So I like to alternate back and forth, just to touch up a little bit on this side, then a little bit on that side, just so it's as symmetrical as possible. All right, so here's our rough draft before the razor. So I'm basically cleaning up the trimmer line with the razor, and you can tell I'm being very careful before I make any strokes, because I don't want to make excessive passes on the skin, because that's going to cause irritation. And I also want to make sure the ash line left behind by the razor is as symmetrical as possible. And the ash line is very helpful for allowing you to see if your angles are off, even by a few degrees, if you train your eyes well enough. This wasn't a video about facial hair, but my client got a beard, and it's part of the lineup process. But here I'm cleaning up the top line of his beard with the straight razor, trying to keep his beard as full as possible. And now we throw an enhancement on. Being kind of light with it, because I like to keep my enhancement as natural looking as possible, but I like to notice it, of course. Getting these little overhanging hairs makes all the difference. Your clients will come back telling you that their lineup lasts longer. We're back with the razor, just cleaning up any potential spillover color, but then any little stubble that's there. But then also, I like to hit it with the razor again just so I get a nice fresher ash line, because makes the end result look better as far as the pictures and video. It's like a natural enhancement. Here is the finished product.
All right, so this has been another installment of our Better Barbering Crash Course. I appreciate y'all for watching. I should have more installments coming soon on different aspects of the haircut. If you got any game or value from this video, go ahead and like and subscribe for me. I'd really appreciate it. Appreciate y'all watching again, but stay tuned to the next episode. Craft Over Clout, I'm out.